Hey my friends, today I find myself in a beautiful tea farm, an ancient farm way up the mountain by the Buddhist monastery here in China. So I wanted to share it with you and talk a bit about the green tea plant. Now this is the #1 superfood on the planet. Yeah, I don't use the word superfood lightly. It literally is. The more we learn about green tea, the more we find out about its health benefits. And it's drank almost as much as water. We find it all through the world, much more popular than coffee. So I wanted to take some time to talk about the history of it, how it's used, how it's cultivated and harvested, and some of the different other interesting facts about it. So join me in learning about Camellia sinensis, the green tea plant. So before we get started, there's a lot of symbolism and mythos and history around this plant. Green tea has been synonymous with enlightenment and spirituality and connection and awakenedness and rejuvenation throughout the ages. So much history that it just keeps piling and piling upon it. You'd think it was one of these miracle plants. It was studied by different spiritual traditions all through Asia and has made its way throughout the world. It is now cultivated in many of the subtropical regions of our planet. This herb is the #1 drink other than water, more popular than coffee. It is found throughout so many different traditions, specifically in places in Asia like Japan and China and India. But it's made its way all through the planet and all through history. In fact, if we look back deep into the history of green tea, we see that it was originally discovered almost 4,500 years ago when the emperor supposedly had a cup of water that had been boiled, and there was a tea leaf, a dead tea leaf found in the bottom of the cup. And he tasted it and said, this tastes great. And for the next quite a few hundred years, this became a drink of the monarchy, of the royalty, of that dynasty. And it grew and grew and grew in popularity throughout Asia, but was always for the upper class. Then around 700 AD, a few thousand years later, a book called The Classic of Tea was written. And in this, a lot of different methods in preparing tea came to light. And so many of these methods started to change the culture of tea and the cultivars. There are thousands of different cultivars of this plant, and it got changed over that period of time, eventually turning into what we have now as all these different varieties of tea. Now, all of it is the exact same plant. Some of them have been hybridized, but essentially it's the same plant. They're only using these top 3 buds of the green tea plant. But these top 3 buds are then fermented or oxidized and turned into the many different types of tea we see today. Whether it's jasmine or Darjeeling or some of the different types of red teas, black teas, white teas, Assam teas, you name it. The matcha being the tiniest spring buds. All these different types of teas are actually the same plant. Now, in the process of creating different teas, they either ferment it with different herbs to add flavor, or they leave it green and roast it down, or they have just the lightest spring tips that are unprocessed in any form, similar to matcha. So tea has changed over the ages, but it's only grown in popularity. When the British came to China, they learned about tea and obsessed over it. They brought this back to England and it became the official drink of England. Tea time, as they say. Trying to push this into the colonies out in North America, this was then rebelled against. And we have things like the Boston Tea Party, where 45 tons of tea were thrown into the ocean. Here in North America, they did not like tea. But of course, that came back, and eventually now we have it popularized in every coffee shop throughout the world, including North America, where you have things like your matcha latte and all these different types of black teas. It's also used for things like kombuchas now, which is a very popular drink in the West, and jun cultures, and all these different fermented drinks. Tea has found its way into the diet of almost everyone on the planet. So as you can see from a traditional tea farm like this, the plants are kept and managed at about 1 meter high. This way it's easy to harvest. All they do when they harvest this plant is they pick just these top 2 to 3 buds. And this is the part that they turn into tea and ferment or turn into green tea, dry, roast, you name it. But the reason is that this top bit is actually what contains the most amount of caffeine in it. And there's little hairs on here that contain a lot more of the caffeine and other alkaloids like theobromine that we find in chocolate and things like this. This also has a lot of the L-theanine and many of the polyphenols. It's all in the growing tips. These are the parts of the plant that are used as tea and that contain the most bioactive chemistry. As you see, some of these more woody, darker leaves are much more bitter and a little more fibrous. So they're not what's used, whereas these are very tender in this light bitter leaf. So every 2 weeks, these are harvested and dried out or crushed and rolled into balls. Sometimes they're smushed with other herbs and fermented for a long time. Some of these teas are fermented for as long as 1,000 years and become very, very expensive. Some of the pu'ers we were looking at in the market were more than 300 years old, and these were very expensive teas. We're talking thousands and thousands of dollars for a little block of tea like that. But it lasts forever. I'll tell you, this plant has powerful chemistry. I mean, the more we study it, the more we learn about the benefits of it. And it just keeps going on and on. It's amazing to me how much we've already figured out about this plant. First thing is green tea has up to 30% polyphenols. Now, this is one of the main active aspects of this plant. It's got a lot of the antioxidant potential in it that is found in it, and it's where much of the health benefits come from. We see things like scrubbing out the arteries, cleaning and antioxidant benefits all through the body. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a second, but there's a lot of other chemistry in here. Of course, you've probably heard of caffeine, right? Green tea has caffeine in it. Why doesn't it give me the jitters that coffee does? Most of the caffeine is actually bound up in tannins, and you don't get it until you ferment it down and make a black tea. Black tea has 4 to 5 times as much caffeine as green tea because it's been fermented and oxidized. But other than just the tannins binding in the caffeine, there's another active compound that supports it. There's something called theobromine. Theobromine acts as a neurotransmitter and supports calming down the body. So you have caffeine raising the awareness and theobromine calming it down. So many of the benefits of tea have been synonymous with focus and clarity, but a calm state versus a hyper jittery state. So this plant wakes you up. It wakes up the system. It wakes up the metabolism, and it works in every aspect of the body to increase the energy and the vitality within the system. So probably the most exciting aspect about this in the Western world is its ability to support metabolism and to reduce weight, to actually emulsify fat within the system, and to be an antioxidant that specifically works on working with abdominal obesity. So a lot of weight loss supplements nowadays have green tea extracts in them to help work with metabolizing the fat and reducing down the waistline. Another one of the exciting health benefits we've seen from green tea is its ability to work with cardiovascular health, to reduce heart disease and stroke, to support emulsifying the cholesterol and moving blood. In that sense, it's an antioxidant through the bloodstream and helps just decongest all the blood pathways. There's been plenty of studies showing lower incidence of cardiovascular issues, especially the strokes and heart disease, when it comes to working with green tea as a regular beverage. Now, to me, one of the most exciting things is how green tea is supporting the neurotransmitters of the body and how the L-theanine actually crosses the blood-brain barrier, and the caffeine stimulates the brain, but the L-theanine calms it down, giving a much more sophisticated, educated way of building neurotransmitter feedback loops. So this is really cool to me because it works with reducing plaquing in the brain itself, which is what we think is related to dementia, but also people who have had green tea as a beverage in their lives regularly seem to have better cognitive function and ability to role play and move through problem solving. So this is great in the modern world because we have way more problems to solve than we ever had in history. So I've been playing with this a little bit as we've been up here, and it's chewing on the green tea plant. There's a lot of studies showing that green tea has antibacterial, antiviral properties and helps with plaquing of the teeth and gums. So actually, as a great chew, just like the coca leaf is in South America, the green tea can be a great chew for working with oral hygiene and dental health. So for me, that's an awesome one. I think this plant probably hasn't been looked at enough for that, but because of its antioxidant qualities and because of its ability to help with ecosystem imbalances, it's a great one to start chewing. So I'm gonna take a moment here and just chew on some tea. It also gives you a bit more of that zing, right? You can absorb some of that in the mouth. So I think it's just a great chew. If I was hiking in these hills for a long time, I'd probably pack a little bit of green tea in my lip. Now that I got some green tea in my system, let's go for a little walk and see if we can chat about and look at a few other aspects of this plant. One thing I've always noticed about this plant is how it stabilizes my blood sugars. When I drink green tea, I feel calm and collected, and I don't need to eat. It's sort of like coffee, but there's a little more stability to this. It also has shown in a lot of the studies that this might be really useful for things like type 2 diabetes and hypoglycemia. So for that adult onset diabetes. For people in the modern world who have too much sugar around them in their lives and get that ups and downs and highs and lows, green tea is one of the perfect plants to just calm you down. I've also found this, especially in the mid-afternoon blues. If I'm feeling tired in a hot climate like this, drinking a bit of tea really calms me down and supports my body. It's kind of ironic, in the Western world, we drink cold beverages, and it's cold beverages we think that cool us down. But in Asia and in parts of the world like here, they drink hot beverages, and it heats the internal body up and sweats out the heat, therefore cooling them down. So green tea was classically drank on hot days to cool the body down. Now, of course, the white teas, the green teas, the light teas are more of that summer and heat type of tea, whereas the black teas, the fermented teas, and the oolongs are more of that fall and winter tea. So choose your tea based on what the season is. Of course, tea has also had so much tradition and ceremony around the drinking of it. When you're doing a tea ceremony, it's all about setting the space, and you set a calm space, usually in the mid-afternoon or the morning or whenever it is, and you start to drink tea. But you don't just drink one cup of tea, you drink multiple cups of tea, and it's usually tiny little amounts, and essentially each round has a different flavor. So when you're drinking green tea, it's best to pour the first batch of water off, essentially just washing the tea of the first batch of water. And then the second batch is a little lighter, and we only steep it for a few seconds. And the third batch is a little stronger, and we steep it for a few more seconds. And the fourth batch is when the flavors start to really pick up. We steep that just a little bit longer, and it keeps steeping them longer, up to 6, 7, 8 batches to make all these different flavors of profile that comes along the tea as you go through the ceremony. My favorites in most of these types of ways of doing tea is around the 4th, 5th, and 6th batch of tea. That's when you really get those flavors opening up. You get all the benefits and the taste from the polyphenols and the caffeine and the theobromine and all the minerals and vitamins and other great compounds that are found within the tea plant itself. Wow. It is so beautiful to be out here on a tea farm, to just be rubbing up against this plant that I know so well, but I only know it from drinking it. I've never actually spent much time hanging out with tea. I've grown a little tea plant, but it never grew anywhere bigger than this big. I've looked for tea in the Cumberland Forest where the old Japanese town site was, never found it, but it's just really peaceful and tranquil being out here in this high mountain tea farm right now. So one of the main things, the big thing that green tea does is just help you improve your quality of life, to live longer. There's been a number of studies done on its ability to help with the aging process, to increase the vitality in old age, and to reduce down cancer growth. So especially in Japan, this is one of the things, and in China, they've been really looking at longevity as the big thing. How do we have the best quality life ever? And in a study with over 40,000 Japanese, they actually showed that in 11 years of following people, the ones who drank 4 to 5 cups of green tea a day had a better quality of life and less incidence of death and disease. So if you've dabbled in tea, or you're a regular tea drinker, or you've never drank tea at all, my recommendation is you start to play with high quality teas. Start to get some of them into your life. Buy some tea, do a few little tea ceremonies, learn a bit more about it, and play with this herb as a great and powerful superfood. This literally is one of the world's top superfoods. It's considered the healthiest beverage on the planet, and it's well worth you investing your time and energy into sipping on a great cup of green tea. Thanks for joining me, and like always, if you enjoyed this video, please comment below with your experience in working with tea, tell your friends, and check out some of our other great videos on working with plants as medicine. May the forest be with you, my friends. Signing off from China. See you on the other side.